Celebrating the 4th of July, Truefire are running a Stars, Stripes and Strings sale, providing 60% off of their all-access pass. If you're interested in that you can dip in and out of every single thing on Truefire. Really great value for money. Also, they got 50% off of some individual courses, so check out the link in the description if you're interested in that. Since it's the 4th of July today, I was kind of thinking about like the contribution of Fender and Gibson and really trying to imagine what the world might be like if we didn't have essentially like absolutely world-changing designs. Like if you think of a guitar, I imagine, I don't know, maybe just do it in your head, like what do you think of when you see guitar in your head? What is it for you? So for me, I think it's a Strat, most likely. For some of you, it might be a Tele. For others, it might be a Les Paul. But I think it's probably one of those 3 or 4 or 5 designs, and I presume anyway. But let me know if it's a Mockingbird or if it's a whatever else it might be. But it's quite an interesting sort of thing to think about. So I just wanted to first of all play some of my favourite sort of designs from Fender and Gibson. So all of these guitars, actually none of them have Fender or Gibson on the headstock, but they're very obviously inspired by those designs, and they're all being played through a Fender Deluxe Reverb, which is the other side of Leo Fender, which of course is super important as well. I think these are some of the best amps that were ever designed, however faithful or not the reissues are. So I didn't necessarily get into Fender stuff until I'd gone to university. I met my buddy Pete, and he had a Fender, and at the time I was more of a humbucker player, and what I wanted from a guitar was a bit more of a neutral sound. Obviously, as you grow up, kind of now what I'm looking for from guitars is for them to sound like the archetypes in many ways. So like when I pick up a Strat, I want it to sound Stratty. Do you know what I mean? Like, not humbuckers in a Strat, you know, these adjustments away from the original design are not that attractive to me. I think there's immense beauty in the original design. Again, totally accepting that there's been decades more of innovation. It's just that for some reason, I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but some people might call them boomer guitars or whatever. I just think there is something eternally awesome about some of this stuff. Anyway, so the story goes that Leo Fender essentially, I think Leo's important because he also basically nudged Gibson to start producing solid body guitars, right? Up until I think it's 1950 where the Esquire came out. That's kind of, Les Paul had been pushing for Gibson to do certain things, but kind of the Esquire was what was kind of proof of concept, saying, well, look, clearly people are interested in buying this stuff. So what took us there, and I was thinking this was like during the wartime, so I just googled it. It was like, what happened to Leo Fender during the war? So before the war, he grew up, he I think made like PA address systems for his school. He was interested in electronics, like radio and that sort of thing. Then the war happens. He doesn't get drafted because he only has one eye. So that's one thing that I didn't know. So that's, you know, why he didn't end up going overseas to do bits and pieces in the war. And even during the war, he was building guitars, bits and pieces, I think lap steel stuff, with Kaufman. Then, shortly after the war, you know, he starts Fender, and 1949, 1950, the Esquire comes out and sort of just changes the world forever. And then from that point on, there's like a good 15 years, right, of like actual incredible innovation. If you think of a Telecaster, okay, you think of a Stratocaster, you think of Jazzmaster, Jaguar, you know, some of these which didn't necessarily succeed to the level of the Strat or whatever, but they're still pretty bonkers designs. And not only that, but alongside it comes the amp side of things, right? From the tweed stuff to the brown face stuff to what I think for me works, I think, best of all, like the blackface era stuff. Incredible innovation up till 1965 when he then left Fender. But like the impact is obvious, right? And to the point, again, like the bolt-on guitar, just as a concept, because Gibson were doing set neck designs, right, and specifically designing things in a different way. The bolt-on manufactured guitar, I think, is an innovation which, what's interesting about it is that you can put together a parts caster like this based on that work that was done initially by Leo Fender, essentially, right? Where it's like, well, if you build a guitar to these specs, you can basically slap them together. It's a really interesting kind of concept. And, you know, would we have things like Ibanez guitars? Would we have all of the rich kind of other bits and pieces that are made that essentially come from the S-type and T-type bolt-on designs? Would we have those without that? I assume not. Just here. That's all right. There's something so sleek and beautiful about the idea of something like the Strat and the Telly, which were, you know, designed to be mass produced, but at the same time, there's like absolute fantastic sort of contours to it, beautiful stuff going on, and you just think, without it, what would guitars even have ended up looking like? If you take away the Fender contribution, what would you end up with? I think it's almost impossible to, well, definitely impossible to sort of take this chunk of guitar history away and think about what you end up with. Like, do you get, without these amplifiers and these guitars, do you get Jeff Beck? Do you get Clapton? Do you get Jimi Hendrix? Do you get Yngwie Malmsteen? Do you get these fantastic things? Hank Marvin, Chris Isaac, all these like iconic things that happen with these guitars in their hand. Yeah, I just think there's so much inherent beauty and iconography with the Fender designs and also the Gibson designs. But for me, I lean towards the Fender stuff, and you think with the amp part of it as well, you know, without the Bassman, do you get Marshalls, do you get Mezzo Boogies? I just think it's impossible really to imagine the guitar space without Fender or Gibson. And it's kind of incredible, like the small amount of people that had such an influence on such a large amount of people after that. So yeah, I just wanted to do a video kind of talking about that, and this idea of like the bolt-on guitar instead of like a one-piece of art / furniture like a Gibson, like the bolt-on guitar that could be made, you know, at scale. I think it's kind of two fairly contrasting ideas. If you look at how a Gibson is made in a factory, even today, to me it looks more complicated. It looks like there's, you know, things like putting binding on a guitar, kind of complex tasks. You know, that is what your Authentic man said is the hardest part about building Gibsons. Like the most skilled part is binding, versus Strats, which are, and Tellys, which are relatively simple beasts, you know, especially these days when a lot of it comes out of a CNC machine, right? But I think there's something so beautiful about just that concept anyway. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Your favourite Fender design, your favourite Gibson design, if you've got any, and can you imagine like a world of music without the American sort of side of the gear, without Fender, without Gibson? What would it be like? Can we even comprehend it? No, obviously not. Anyway, on with your day. Hopefully solar panels will be fixed by the time this video goes up.